There's something about an ordinary object that tells the truth before we're ready to hear it, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly sitting there, waiting. For James Carter, that object was a pair of shoes, nothing special about them, not new, not expensive. Just the sneakers he wore almost every day, to the mailbox, to the grocery store, to the park where he liked to sit on Tuesday mornings when the weather allowed. They were sitting by the front door that Saturday when his granddaughter, Amara, noticed something. She was 8 years old, the kind of child who sees everything and says most of it out loud. She pointed to the toe, the left one, mostly, but the right one too. "Grandpa, why are your shoes worn out right here?" James looked down, smiled, gave it a moment. "They're just old shoes," he said, the most reasonable explanation in the world. But Amara kept looking, not at the shoes anymore, at him. The way children sometimes do, with a kind of unfiltered attention that adults learn to turn off somewhere around age 12. And for just a moment, James looked too, not at the shoes, at the question underneath the shoes. James was 76 years old, retired after 31 years driving a school bus through the same neighborhoods, the same streets, the same familiar routes, a man who had spent 3 decades responsible for other people's children, who had shown up every single morning, who had never once called in sick unless he absolutely had to. That kind of man. He'd been a widower for 3 years now, living alone in the same house he and Dorothy had shared for 40 years. Managing just fine, he would tell you. More than fine. He wasn't the kind of man who talked much about his body. It had always been there when he needed it. That was enough. Until a pair of old shoes asked a question he hadn't thought to ask himself. "My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a physician specializing in aging and functional mobility, 24 years in clinical practice, 24 years of people arriving with questions they didn't quite know how to ask yet. I created this channel because of a simple belief. The body rarely lies. It changes quietly. It adapts without asking permission. It leaves evidence in places we don't always think to look. A staircase, a chair, a railing we didn't used to need, or the worn toe of a shoe that's been walking a little differently than it used to." James thought he had old shoes. What he actually had was a conversation his body had been trying to start for a while. And today, I want to have that conversation with you. James didn't limp. That's the first thing worth saying. He didn't use a cane. He hadn't fallen. He hadn't been to the emergency room. He hadn't called his daughter in the middle of the night because something felt wrong. By every obvious measure, James Carter was doing fine. And that's exactly what makes this kind of change so easy to miss, because we tend to pay attention to the dramatic things, the fall, the diagnosis, the morning we wake up and something is clearly, undeniably different. But the body rarely works that way. It doesn't announce its changes. It doesn't send a formal notice. It whispers first, for a long time, before it ever raises its voice. And the worn toe of a shoe? That's a whisper. Here's what was actually happening inside those shoes. James's steps had gotten smaller, not dramatically, not in a way that anyone would stop him on the street to ask about, just smaller. A little lower to the ground, a little closer, together, a little less clearance between the sole of his foot and the surface beneath it. When we walk with a full, healthy stride, the foot lifts with intention, the heel strikes first, the weight rolls forward through the arch. The toe pushes off cleanly at the end of each step. But when the stride shortens, when the steps become smaller and lower, that clean push-off changes. The toe begins to drag, just slightly. Not enough to trip, not enough to notice, but enough to leave a mark. On the front of a shoe, on the left side, mostly, but the right side too. Amara didn't know any of this, of course. She was 8 years old. She just saw something that looked different from what she expected, but her eyes had caught something that James's hadn't, because James had been inside those steps, living them, one at a time, for long enough that they had simply become normal. This is one of the most important things I want you to understand about how the body changes with age. Not the dramatic changes, the gradual ones. The ones that happen slowly enough that we adjust without realizing we're adjusting. We take a slightly different route because the old one has that uneven section of sidewalk. We hold the railing now, not because we have to, but because it's there. We slow down a little on unfamiliar ground. We think twice before a surface we wouldn't have thought about 5 years ago. None of these things feel like decline from the inside. They feel like common sense, reasonable caution, the natural wisdom of a person who has lived long enough to know that falls happen. And sometimes they are exactly that. But sometimes, and this is the part that matters, sometimes what feels like wisdom is actually adaptation. The body learning to do less because we've been asking it to do less. Not because it can't, because it hasn't been asked. Aging is real. The years change us. Strength changes. Recovery changes. Balance changes. That part is true. But there is another change that often gets mistaken for aging. And that's the one I want to talk about today. It's called deconditioning. And it looks almost identical from the outside. Deconditioning is what happens when the body adapts to reduced demand. When we move less, the body becomes less capable of movement. Not because of age, because of absence. The cruel irony is this: the more carefully we protect ourselves from the demands of movement, the less capable we become of meeting those demands when they arrive. And they always arrive. The grandchild who suddenly wants to race you to the next bench, the airport you haven't walked through in years, the wedding where the parking lot is farther away than you expected. James hadn't stopped moving. He walked every day, he managed his house, he drove himself to the grocery store. But somewhere along the way, without deciding to, he had narrowed the range of what he asked his body to do. And the body, being the efficient and adaptive system that it is, had quietly adjusted. The steps got smaller, the clearance got lower. The shoe got worn in a place it hadn't been worn before. I've seen this pattern hundreds of times over 24 years. Not in people who gave up. Not in people who stopped caring. In people who were doing their best, who were being careful, who were, by any reasonable measure, managing well, and who had no idea that the body was already beginning to tell a different story. The question isn't whether James should have noticed sooner. The question is what he was going to do now that an 8-year-old girl with no filter and very good eyes had pointed at his shoes and asked a question that deserved a real answer. James never thought about walking. That's the honest truth of it. For most of his life, walking was simply something that happened, something the body did, while the mind was somewhere else entirely, while he was thinking about the route, about the kids on the bus, about what Dorothy had asked him to pick up on the way home. Walking was invisible. The way breathing is invisible. The way blinking is invisible. The way all the things the body does perfectly, automatically, without asking for attention, are invisible. Until they aren't. He couldn't point to a specific morning when things changed. There was no single moment, no event he could look back at and say, "There, that's where it started." It was quieter than that. A stretch of sidewalk near the hardware store that had always been slightly uneven, he'd walked it 100 times without thinking, and then one afternoon he found himself stepping around it instead of over it. Not because he had to, just because it seemed easier. A set of stairs at his nephew's house. He'd always taken them without pausing, and then, at Thanksgiving, 2 years ago, he noticed he was holding the railing on the way down. Not gripping it, just resting his hand there. Letting it be available. An evening walk he used to take around the full perimeter of the park, 3/4 of a mile. He still walked it. But somewhere along the way, he had started taking the shorter path without really deciding to. None of these things felt significant in the moment. Each one felt like the obvious, reasonable choice. And they were, in isolation. But together, laid end to end, one small adjustment following another, they told a story that James hadn't been reading. Here's something I've come to understand deeply after 2 decades of this work. Confidence in movement is not just a feeling. It's a physical reality. When we move through the world with confidence, when we walk without hesitation, when we change direction without breaking, when we step onto uneven ground without pausing, we are doing something very specific inside the body. We are sending a signal, a continuous, repeated signal that says, "I need this. Keep it ready. Keep it available." And the body responds to that signal. The muscles stay engaged, the joints stay mobile. The nervous system stays sharp, processing information about balance and position and the relationship between the foot and the ground beneath it. But when confidence begins to quietly retreat, when we start choosing the smoother path, the shorter route, the railing that wasn't strictly necessary, the signal changes. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the body is always listening. And it begins very gradually to adjust. I want to be precise about something here, because I think it matters. I am not saying that caution is wrong. Caution is not wrong. After a certain age, the consequences of a fall are serious. The recovery is longer. The impact on independence can be significant and lasting. A person who has lived long enough to understand that is not being irrational when they choose the safer path. That's wisdom. But there is a difference between caution that informs a decision and caution that begins to make decisions on its own, between the choice to be careful and the habit of being afraid. And the difficult thing, the genuinely difficult thing, is that from the inside, they can feel almost identical. James wasn't afraid. He would have told you that without hesitation. He was just being sensible. But the body doesn't distinguish between sensible and afraid. It only responds to what you ask of it. And James, without knowing it, had been asking for a little less, month by month, season by season. One small, reasonable, completely understandable adjustment at a time. I've never found a perfect term for what happens next, but I see it often. Often enough that I've started paying attention whenever it appears. It's a slow, quiet narrowing of the territory where a person feels comfortable moving. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like preference. I prefer the elevator. I prefer the shorter route. I prefer to sit rather than stand when I have the option. Preference is comfortable. Preference doesn't require explanation. Preference doesn't feel like a problem, but preference, repeated often enough, becomes pattern, and pattern, sustained long enough, begins to shape what the body believes it's capable of. 3 years after Dorothy died, James was living alone in a house he knew perfectly, every step of it, every doorway, every slightly awkward angle between the kitchen and the hallway. He had adapted to all of it, completely, without thinking, and that was, in some ways, the problem. Not what happened to the shoes. What had been happening to the man wearing them. When the world becomes perfectly predictable, the body stops preparing for anything else. It stops rehearsing for the unexpected, the uneven surface, the sudden change of direction, the grandchild who grabs your hand and starts walking faster than you anticipated. The body is extraordinarily good at becoming exactly what the environment demands of it. No more, no less. James's environment had become very familiar, very manageable, very safe, and his body had become exactly that, familiar, manageable, safe. But life, real life, the life James still wanted to live, wasn't always going to be any of those things. Amara had asked a simple question about a pair of old shoes, but the question underneath the question was something else entirely. Every step is a conversation. Most people never think about it that way. But that's what walking actually is. A continuous exchange between the body and the surface beneath it. The foot lands, the ground pushes back. The body reads that information and decides what comes next. Where to shift the weight, how to adjust, whether to slow down or continue. James had been having this conversation for 76 years. He just hadn't been listening to it the same way anymore. For most of his adult life, the conversation had been rich, 31 years of walking to and from a school bus, parking lots in all weather, curbs, gravel, the occasional patch of ice on a January morning that required every bit of attention he had. His body had learned from all of it, not consciously, not through effort or intention, but through repetition, through exposure. The body learns that way. It learns from curbs, from uneven sidewalks, from wet grass, from turning quickly when someone calls your name, from all the small surprises that movement brings. That's how the body stays ready, not through a program, not through a gym, through the simple, repeated experience of meeting the world in different ways and finding its footing every time. But retirement changes things, not dramatically, not all at once. The parking lots become fewer, the routes become more familiar, the surfaces become more predictable, and the conversation between the body and the ground begins to simplify. Fewer questions, fewer variables, fewer surprises. The body as always adapts. It becomes very good at the specific conversation it's been having. And quietly, gradually, less practiced at the ones it hasn't. In the year before Amara noticed the shoes, James had been making small adjustments. He'd stopped taking the long route through the park, the one with the slight slope near the east entrance, and started taking the flat path along the street instead. He'd started parking closer to the entrance at the grocery store, not because he had to, just because the spot was usually available and it seemed like the sensible choice. He'd stopped walking to the hardware store on rainy days, which was reasonable, which anyone would do. But the rainy days had started to include days that were merely overcast, and then days that were simply cool, and then days when he just didn't feel like it. None of it felt like retreat. It felt like preference, like the accumulated wisdom of a man who had earned the right to choose his own pace. And in one sense, it was exactly that. But the body doesn't only respond to our intentions. It responds to what we actually do. And what James had actually been doing, day by day, season by season, was asking the conversation to become a little simpler, a little more predictable, a little less demanding. And the body, his body, which had carried him through 31 years of school bus routes and January ice and parking lots in the rain, that body had been listening, faithfully, efficiently, the way it always does. Becoming, gradually, exactly what the conversation required. No more, no less. James wasn't incapable. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He was strong enough, healthy enough, mobile enough, but he had been asking less and less of the conversation. Shorter steps, familiar routes, predictable surfaces, a world quietly edited down to the things he already knew he could manage. And here is what I've come to understand after 24 years of watching this happen. The body doesn't decline all at once. It simplifies. And over time, it becomes a reflection of the life we've been living inside it. Which means that what looks like aging is sometimes something else entirely. Sometimes it's just the body waiting for someone to ask a little more of it again. It turned out that someone was going to be an 8-year-old girl with very good eyes and no particular filter, who looked at a pair of old shoes and asked a question that deserved a real answer. He didn't join a gym. I want to be clear about that. Because when people hear a story like this, when they recognize themselves in James or in someone they love, the instinct is often to think in terms of programs, memberships, equipment, a structured plan with a start date, and a set of goals. And sometimes those things help, but that's not where James started. James started with his shoes. He put them on the kitchen table that evening, just looked at them for a while. The worn toe on the left. The matching wear on the right. Slightly less, but unmistakably there. The way the sole had compressed unevenly in a pattern he had never noticed because he had never thought to look. Amara had gone home by then. The house was quiet, and James sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold and thought about what it meant that an 8-year-old had seen something in 30 seconds that he had missed for months, maybe longer. He wasn't angry at himself. That's important. He wasn't ashamed. He was just paying attention, possibly for the first time in a while, to something he had stopped thinking was worth paying attention to. The next morning, he took the long route, the one through the park, the one with the slight slope near the east entrance that he had been avoiding without quite admitting he was avoiding it. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't push himself. He didn't time it or count his steps or arrive home with any particular sense of accomplishment. He just walked a path he had been walking around and noticed things, the way the slope required something slightly different from his legs than the flat path did. The way the gravel near the east gate asked his feet to make small, constant adjustments. The way his body that had been having the same simplified conversation for months, had to work a little harder to keep up with the new one. Not painfully, not dangerously, just differently. I've thought a lot about what made James different from the people who don't change course, because most people, when they recognize this pattern in themselves, don't do what James did. They acknowledge it. They mean to do something about it. They have every intention of taking the longer route, choosing the more demanding path, asking a little more of the conversation, and then life intervenes, or the weather is bad, or the knee feels a little stiff that morning, or it just doesn't feel like the right day, and the intention stays an intention. What made James different, I think, wasn't motivation. It wasn't willpower. It wasn't even the shock of recognition that came from looking at those shoes. It was something simpler. He decided to treat the body the way he had always treated things that mattered to him, with attention, with consistency, with the understanding that small things, done regularly, are how anything real gets built. James had been a school bus driver for 31 years. He knew something about showing up. The changes were slow. I want to be honest about that. The body rarely changes all at once. It adapts quietly, gradually, one small adjustment at a time. The steps got a little longer. The clearance got a little higher. The routes got a little more varied. He started parking farther away again, not always, not in bad weather, but on the ordinary days, the days when there was no particular reason not to, he started choosing the longer walk. He started taking the stairs at his nephew's house, both ways, without thinking about it. He started walking to the hardware store again, even on the cool days, even on the overcast ones, and somewhere in there, he couldn't have told you exactly when. He stopped editing the world down to the things he already knew he could manage, and started letting it ask a little more of him again. 6 months later, his granddaughter visited again. She grabbed his hand and started running toward the backyard, the way children do, without warning, without explanation, because the idea had arrived and the body was already moving. And for a moment, James didn't stop to evaluate it, didn't calculate it, didn't negotiate with it. He simply went. He ran, not fast, not far, but he ran. And he didn't think about it afterward, not once. Which, if you understand anything about what the previous year had looked like for James Carter, is the whole story. The first thing James noticed wasn't strength, it wasn't speed, it wasn't some measurable improvement he could point to and say, "There, that's the difference." It was smaller than that. It was the absence of something. He noticed it first on a Tuesday morning in October. He was crossing the parking lot at the grocery store, the far end of it, where he had started parking again. And it had rained the night before. The asphalt was still wet in patches, uneven in the way parking lots get after years of use and repair and use again. And he walked across it without thinking, not without care, not recklessly, but without the low, quiet calculation that had become so habitual he had stopped noticing it was there. He didn't slow down at the wet patch near the cart return. He didn't angle his path toward the drier section closer to the curb. He just walked. And it was only when he reached the entrance and pulled the door open that he realized what hadn't happened. He hadn't negotiated with the parking lot. He had just crossed it. There were other moments like that, small ones, Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. The Saturday his nephew called from upstairs, and James answered without pausing at the bottom step to think about the climb. The morning he turned quickly in the kitchen when the kettle started whistling, turned fast, the way you do when something catches you off guard, and felt completely steady. The afternoon he walked to the hardware store and came home the long way without deciding to, without it being a choice. He was simply walking, and his feet took the longer route because that had become, quietly, the normal thing. None of these moments were dramatic. None of them would have meant anything to anyone watching from the outside, but James noticed them, and he understood what they meant. I think this is one of the things that gets lost when we talk about physical health in later life. We talk about it in terms of metrics: strength, endurance, balance scores, fall risk assessments, and those things matter. I use them in my work every day, but the thing that actually changes a person's life, the thing that determines whether someone lives fully inside their own body or carefully around it, rarely shows up in a measurement. It shows up in a parking lot on a Tuesday morning, in the absence of a calculation that used to be constant, in the quiet return of a confidence so ordinary, so unremarkable, that you only notice it when you realize it had been gone. James started accepting invitations he had been declining, not dramatically, not all at once, but his granddaughter's school play in November. He had told himself he would go, but the auditorium had a lot of stairs, and the parking was always difficult, and he had been planning a quiet excuse. He went. He took the stairs. He didn't think about the parking. His nephew's birthday in December, held at a restaurant he didn't know, in a part of town he wasn't familiar with, which meant uneven sidewalks and a parking situation he couldn't predict in advance. He went. He walked from wherever he found a spot. He didn't think about it until much later, when he was driving home, and realized that 6 months ago he would have spent the entire week before finding reasons why this particular dinner was going to be difficult. The world had not changed. The stairs were still stairs. The parking was still unpredictable. The sidewalks were still uneven. But James had stopped negotiating with all of it before he arrived. And what interested me most wasn't where he was going. It was what he had stopped thinking about. The wet pavement, the extra block from the parking spot, the unfamiliar staircase, the quick turn in the kitchen. These weren't tests. They were ordinary moments. And ordinary moments are often where mobility quietly lives, or quietly disappears. If you've been watching this and recognizing something, not in James, necessarily, but in yourself, I want to say something directly, not as a prescription, not as a program, just as an observation from someone who has watched this pattern long enough to know how it ends, in both directions. The body is almost always more available than we've been asking it to be. The conversation is almost always still possible. It just needs someone to start it again. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where it would be easy to turn everything we've been talking about into a checklist. 5 signs your balance is declining, 3 things to do this week, a program, a plan, a set of instructions. And I'm not going to do that. Not because those things don't have value, but because I don't think that's what this moment calls for. What this moment calls for is something quieter, an invitation to pay attention. Not to your limitations. That's not what I mean. I mean the opposite of that. I mean paying attention the way James paid attention when he sat at his kitchen table with a cold cup of tea and looked at a pair of shoes he had stopped really seeing. Not with judgment. Not with alarm. The way James looked at those shoes, not searching for a problem, just wondering what they might be trying to say. So let me ask you something, not as a clinician, not as someone with a protocol to follow, just as someone who has spent a long time watching the gap between how people are living and how they could be living, and thinking about what makes the difference. When did you last walk on something that wasn't flat? Not a hike, not an athletic challenge, just uneven ground, grass, gravel, a slight slope, a surface that asked your feet to make small adjustments rather than simply repeat the same motion on the same predictable surface. When did you last turn quickly? Not because you were exercising, just because something surprised you, because someone called your name from another room, because you heard something and your body moved before you decided to move it. When did you last take a route you didn't already know, park somewhere unfamiliar, walk a block you hadn't planned on? Choose the path that asked something slightly different of you rather than the one you already knew you could manage. I'm not asking because these are tests. I'm asking because these are ordinary moments, and ordinary moments are where the conversation either stays rich or quietly simplifies. Here's what I've observed. The people who move well in their 70s and 80s, and I've known many of them, are rarely the people who followed the most rigorous program in their 60s. They're the people who never stopped having a varied conversation with the world, who kept walking on imperfect surfaces, who kept turning quickly when something surprised them, who kept accepting the invitations that required them to navigate something unfamiliar, not heroically, not with intention or discipline or any particular awareness of what they were doing, just continuously, the way James had for 31 years without thinking about it. And then, after a period of simplification that happens to almost everyone, chose to begin again. I think about the shoes a lot, not James's specifically, but the idea of them, the way a pair of shoes can hold, in their wear patterns, an honest record of how a body has been moving through the world. More honest sometimes than the story we tell ourselves, because the shoes don't know what we intended to do. They only know what we actually did, where we actually went, how we actually landed, what we actually asked of the body that carried us there. The body is patient, more patient than most of us realize. It adapts to the conversation we've been having. And when the conversation changes, it often responds, almost always more ready than we assumed. I want to come back to the shoes one last time, not because the story needs a tidy ending, but because I think there's something in that image that we haven't quite finished with yet. A pair of shoes tells you where someone has been, but it also tells you something else. It tells you how they arrived, whether they arrived fully, whether they arrived with the kind of presence that comes from a body that was engaged with the journey, or whether they arrived carefully, minimally, having negotiated every step before they took it. James's shoes, when Amara looked at them, told a story of someone who had been arriving carefully for a long time, not because he had to, but because that had become, slowly and without his noticing, the only way he knew how to move. The shoes that Amara noticed were eventually replaced. James bought a new pair about 8 months after that Sunday afternoon visit. He mentioned it in passing, not as a milestone, not as a symbol, just as a fact. The new ones were already showing wear, not evenly, not perfectly, but differently. The marks were spread across the sole, as though the person wearing them had been having more conversations again, more surfaces, more roots, more surprises. I looked at them when he wasn't paying attention, and I understood what they meant. I've been doing this work for 24 years, and the thing I keep coming back to, the thing that stays with me long after the clinical details have faded, is how quietly it happens, in both directions, the simplification and the return. Neither one announces itself. Neither one arrives with a moment you can point to and say, there, that's when everything changed. It's just the body, adapting to the conversation it's been given, faithfully, efficiently, the way it always does. James understood this, not in those words, not as a philosophy, but in the way he felt when he ran with his granddaughter in the backyard, not fast, not far, but without thinking about it. And I've come to believe that many of the most important victories in later life look exactly like that. Small, ordinary, almost invisible, until you realize what they made possible. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm here every Monday through Friday. Not with programs, not with prescriptions, just with the kind of honest conversation I think this subject deserves. Because the body is patient, more patient than most of us realize. It adapts to the conversation it's been given, and sometimes all it takes to change that conversation is an 8-year-old girl asking a question about a pair of old shoes.